The San Diego Unified School District didn't apply for the Race to the Top funds again this year. It's come under a lot of scrutiny and criticism for that. The Race to the Top funds. Richard, you've been doing a good job of this. Why don't you kind of introduce this and sort of tell us what Race to the Top is, and tell us why San Diego Unified doesn't go after that money?
So Race to the Top is the Obama administration sort of signature is the Obama administration's sort of signature effort to try to improve low-performing public schools. So Race to the Top focuses on the bottom 5% of public schools around the country, which is fantastic. We have been impatient, frankly, in looking for a federal government that focuses on getting into the schools with the most need. The problem that we have with Race to the Top is it prescribes a set of solutions. It says, this is the way you improve the bottom 5% of schools. And it says, you can either close the school, you can convert the school to a charter school, you can fire all the teachers and the principal, or you can fire about half the teachers and the principal and implement a series of things like evaluating teachers based on standardized test scores. The problem that we have with that, and we don't claim to speak for what would make sense in other school districts in other states around the country. However, there is no evidence that any of those four ideas leads to improvement in student achievement. And we know in San Diego Unified that what does lead to improvement in student achievement, whether we're talking about schools run by the district or public charter schools, is you create a collaborative environment within the school where the teachers are working closely together, focused on data that's in real time, not once a year test scores. The principal is in the classroom working with the teachers, and the parents are very involved. Where we see that happening, we see tremendous increase in student achievement, including in the schools with the greatest need. What we're about is expanding that strategy, what actually works, understanding what works and expanding it. What we're not about is changing the strategy to accommodate untested, unproven, one-size-fits-all mandates coming from the federal government that do not offer money to help us where we need it, that would cause us to spend money on consulting systems, evaluation systems to do things that we don't believe actually work.
Well, now this is the issue that I really wanted to get into. Bill, I'll let you speak in a second, but this is what I wanted to get into on this, which is the issue of evaluation. Now, you guys on the school board are consistently saying, our test scores have gone up, our test scores have gone up, we're doing well because our test scores are going up. But when it comes to evaluating teachers on test scores, you shy away from that. And you say, no, that's not a good idea, that's not okay. My understanding of the Race to the Top funds is that were you to install a robust system of evaluation, which had, as part of it, took account of test scores, you would be able to get your hands on a whole lot of extra money, which is a huge problem for the district. John, why not do that?
Well, first of all, I certainly am in favor of comprehensively evaluating our teachers. And what we don't need to do is look for gimmicky ways to do that. Say, okay, we're going to take this test score, we're going to do this once a year, and that's what the teacher is going to be evaluated on. What we have been saying to our principals is you need to be in the classroom every day. The principals right now can, and the teachers, everyone has access to this data. They can look at it. They can see where the problem is. Then they go into the classroom and they observe what's happening. People say they can't, the principals have a difficult time removing teachers. They can if they are constantly in the classroom observing them. The principals who are not in the classroom observing them would have extra work. If they're doing their job, they can evaluate the teachers, and we will have this information. Now, in terms of the mechanics of the whole Race to the Top and the issue of the test scores and so forth, the problem is, and this is what the superintendent looked at, was in practical terms, the San Diego Unified would automatically be disqualified because of certain rules in California that we're not going to change overnight, and so therefore we would spend, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in time in terms of doing an application that would not succeed anyway. But I just want to be very clear that in the long run, we very definitely need to look at evaluation process, but not in this simple gimmicky way that it's been thrown out.
Bill, I can see you want to say something about teacher evaluation. What do you have to say?
Well, let me clear up something about the district and the application for Race to the Top. How many people were at the board meeting on Tuesday? Anybody at the board meeting on Tuesday? I was
Scott
there.
Barnett, you were at the board meeting on Tuesday, weren't you?
Yeah.
Put your hand up.
I was there. I was there. And what was discussed was not just why they weren't going to apply, but a board member, after all of this discussion, this is what she said. She goes, well, it looks like we're doing this. It looks like we're doing this. It looks like we're doing it. It looks like we're doing everything that Race to the Top is asking us to do. Why don't we apply for the money? I mean, it was after she went through every issue, you guys, and responded in the things that the district is currently doing and saying, well, we're leaving $10 million on the table every year. We're already doing these things.
What about the particular issue of teacher evaluation?
So here's the thing about teacher evaluations. As a matter of fact, I having been with the district, with the U.S. Department of Education, and having been in a school and watched what's going on, some of what I think is happening here is this. You're either going to be a professional or you're not, right? I mean, all of us are, if you're working a job, you're a professional. And as a professional, you should be evaluated equally in terms of the things that impact what you do as a profession. So I see an evaluation system that still does not measure, and it doesn't have to measure, we're not talking about just measuring test scores, but measuring how effective a person is in their classroom teaching and helping students to learn. So people will talk about, well, we're doing this, and the principal can come in and do this. But I'll be honest with you, folks. I'm talking about I have been in a school, in the classroom, walking around and looking at teachers and principals and vice principals, and you start to wonder, what do they use to really evaluate? And I think that there are some things that can change, some things that need to be changed. And I think part of that is sitting down with the teachers union and working on an evaluation system that treats teachers as professional people like they should be treated as professionals.
Mark, I know you have some thoughts on this as well. Yeah.
I'll be brief. Okay, Race to the Top. As a board member, you'll find that I'm going to speak real clearly. They're not applying for the funds because they don't want to be held accountable. Simple. Because there's rules you have to follow, and if you get the money, they have to follow those rules. So they're not going to do it. Second thing is, when you're talking about evaluations, I'm the only person up here of these gentlemen who's actually evaluated teachers on the current evaluation system. I've evaluated hundreds of teachers. I've been evaluated myself. I understand it's based on something called STOL objectives, but there really is no measurement of tests. However, the principal, if your test scores aren't good, is going to drag you in the office and talk to you and say, why aren't these test scores good? And you're going to be on the radar. So a system of evaluation needs to be on a weighted scale. A certain percentage for test scores, certain percentage of continuing education, certain percentage for classroom management. These systems are in place in 400 different school districts around the world. But my question to my opponent is, you've had 4 years. And it's the same system. What are you doing? You have 4 years to do this. This is not rocket science. They're already done. You just have to modify them for the district. And just to dovetail on the last point, I've attended school board meetings, but moreover, was an actual classroom teacher. I've been in the classroom. I know what teachers do day in and day out. I've been an administrator. I know what it's like to implement failed policies, and I know what it's like to implement good policies. So if the question is about my experience, attending a board meeting does not make a person qualified. But 20 years in education and being a professor at a university teaching teachers does.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so moving on from this a little bit, the San Diego Unified School District, I think I'm right, spends about 92% of its day-to-day general fund budget on people, on salaries and benefits, on its staff. That leaves very, very little left over. So obviously your relations with your staff, with your unions, are extremely important. We've seen that relationship, I think it's fair, deteriorate a little bit over the last few years. We had a union leadership that was pretty hostile towards collaborating with the school district, kind of wanted to go off in its own direction. We've seen changes in the leadership there now. What will each one of you do going forwards to work with unions to come to some of these solutions? Because whether you like it or not, you're not going to be able to wave a magic wand and make things happen. You do have to work with the unions. And just for some context here, I think it's fair to say and point out that John, the union, SDEA has endorsed you last time around. Richard, you obviously have been endorsed by the SDEA. SDEA hasn't endorsed either of you guys. So let's talk about this and about how you work out those relationships. Mark, are you saying that they have, or you want to answer? Okay.
Well, I talk about the union. Remember, I was in the union. I paid union dues. I can work with unions. I think unions do serve a purpose. But yes, I reached out to Bill Freeman. I reached out to him and asked him to talk to me. I didn't get a response. But what I find very strange is I received some emails from this group called the Breakfast Club. And these are teachers who are also members of the union. And they have basically, in their posting, Breakfast Club of World Press, have indicated that they believe, you guys can read it yourself, that John Evans received a union endorsement implicitly if he elected to fire Brenda Campbell, assistant superintendent. Now, I didn't make this up. I'm just reading it, and I have the documentation here to prove it if anybody would like to see it. So that's out
Mark,
there.
Let's talk about you, though. Let's talk about how, Bill Freeman didn't call you back, right?
No, Bill Freeman didn't call me back, and here's the irony about working. When you have a union that's endorsing a candidate, and that same candidate has to sit across the board and represent the school, that's real challenging. That's like having a defense attorney and a prosecutor working on the same trial. How can the union pay for somebody to get on the board, and then that person is not supposed to represent the union? They're supposed to represent the board. So the unions and the teachers would be working with somebody who's been in the union, and I do have tons of teachers' support. So I'm union friendly, and they trust.
Bill,
Do I answer?
Bill, let me yeah, you did. Okay.
I heard you're endorsed by the Democrat John DeBeck, so my vote is with you. I'm voting for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, Bill, you obviously in the same situation. The union has endorsed your opponent, Marnie Foster. Wish she was here today, but she's not. How do you, if you're elected in November, how do you go about forging an alliance with those guys or working with them?
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I did sit down with the SDA. I sat down with them, and I had a conversation and said to them how I would look at the types of things that the union need to deal with. Listen, I'm an old AFL-CIO union person. I mean, I was in the teachers union, and I left teaching in 1977. And if you know anything about the history of the San Diego Unified School District, that was the year that the union went on strike. So I understand very clearly how unions operate and unions work. And I'd be more than happy, and I think the teachers who I've worked with and the principals and the vice principals and parents who I've worked with know that I would be more than happy to sit down and work with the union and work with them in terms of focusing on what we need to do to ensure that our students get the best quality education.
Are we done? No, we haven't been cut off yet. No, they're not going to cut me off. We've got a few minutes left.